This conference will now be recorded.
So before we get to know about application architecture, we have to understand about authentication and authorization. There are two terms. One is authentication and the second one is authorization. So what is authentication and what is authorization? Okay. So anyone aware of it? What is authentication and what is authorization? Anyone aware of it?
Authentication means by using some OTPs or calls, it will check whether we are correct users or not.
Okay.
And
Then what is
authorization means,
authorization?
yeah, authorization means it will check whether we are having access for that application or not.
Okay.
Accordingly,
So
it will display.
that's true. Let me tell you about the same. Okay. Authentication means see the server level access, whether you are allowed to enter into the server first of all or not, application server. That is called authentication. Okay. That means, for example, let me tell you, imagine there is a software company. Okay. That software company, you imagine the physical locations. Okay. Imagine physical location. There is a software company. So there are many departments that works together in that company. Okay. Let's say you have IT department, you have finance department. There can be a number of other departments also. Okay. Now there is a physical establishment of the building. Okay. For that company. So every employee of the organization, that particular company, will be given with some access card. So no one, outsiders are not allowed. Okay, usually. Now this IT department and the finance department, all are employees of the organization. All are there working in that building only. So they have their separate wings. So one wing is separately meant for finance department. Another wing is separately meant for IT department. So when they enter into the building, all of them have been given with ID cards, okay, access cards. When they enter through the building, so at the entrance gate of the respective premises, you have to swipe the card. Okay. When you get the green, that means you are allowed, right? So the IT department guy as well as finance department, when they are employees of the company, when they swipe the card, they are allowed to enter into the building. So now both of them, their access is being verified at the high level, overall entrance level. So whether these persons are allowed to enter into the building or not. So for both of them, it is successful. So after they enter, IT department guy go to IT wing, and again he has to swipe there to enter into IT wing. He swiped it, it is successful. Similarly, finance department person is going to swipe at the finance department wing, and they are also allowed to enter into finance department. Now let's look at vice versa. So the IT department person, he has some work with someone in the finance department, where he wanted to enter into finance department wing. When they swipe the card, this person, when he swipes the card, what happens is it says red color light. That means you do not have access to enter into finance department. So similarly, vice versa. Okay, so now both of them are employees of the same company, but still each other cannot access the opposite departments, okay, to enter into that and access its features. So now the high level, what has happened, entering into the building, at that place one verification has happened, and again at the wing place, okay, when they enter inside the building and at the respective wing places, it is again verifying uh, the respective person, okay, whether access and all. Okay, so now the first one, at the very entrance of the building, whatever the access verification that is being done, that is called as authentication. So imagine that building as one server. In the server there are multiple different applications, or maybe one application having multiple modules. Okay, so now they are allowed to enter inside, everyone, but Authorization, again, it has to verify. You are not authorized to enter into the other swing. Okay, when you are working with one of the department, you have access only to that particular department. Authorization will be looked at to the specific components of the application. The whole application level will be authentication. Okay, so when we go to any restaurant, we find it very often, right? So you are going to have and sit at the dining place, and there will be one place called, let's say, cooking place. Outsiders are not allowed, or unauthorized okay, and outsiders are not allowed, something like that they will write, right? Okay, restricted access, like that. Only the people who are there, who are cooks, will be allowed to enter into that cooking place, but visitors are not allowed to go there. That is an unauthorized. So that is authorization. Who is authorized to access the specific components? Okay, and you are not authorized as a visitor, okay, as a customer. And but overall building, everyone is allowed to enter inside. So the overall building, when you are entering, that is authentication, and inside each individual component is called authorization. Everyone clear? Make sense? Every one of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the difference between authentication and authorization. See, whenever we are going to build any software application, authentication to be defined, as well as authorization also to be set up. Authentication setup to be done and authorization setup to be done. So how this authentication and authorization setups will be done technically is not our course, but the high level we have to look at and understand. If you are working in IT industry on any project, it's not only Pega. The one what I have told so far and what I am going to tell you now, it is not related to Pega alone. Any application, whether .NET or Java or C#, anything, the same practice usually. And now let me open a diagram. So look at here. This is a high level diagram. Let me close this and open in. Okay, look at here now. See, whenever a user is going to, a requester is going to send a request from the browser to the application server. This is application server and this is browser. We usually open browser and we type www.hdfcbank.com and it will first to display the login screen. Okay, so now see, let's say for example, if Bank of America has 10 applications, 10 different, it's not only one technology. Pega applications are there, Java applications are there, .NET applications are there. Like this, there will be n number of applications. Each application to in order to give access to the end users, first we have to display a login screen, right? So usually every business is going to maintain the login screen out of the application server at one common server. Means suppose you have 10 different applications, 10 different URLs of a single business entity. So you type any URL of that particular business entity, the login screen which you get will be same. I can tell you a live example. That is, you take Google. Google has n number of different products, different applications. Google has YouTube application, Google has Google Drive application, Google have Google Photos application, and Google has what else? Google Maps application. Okay, and it has some other Google AdWords, Google AdSense. Like this, there are multiple applications. But if you observe any time, for all of these applications, if you try to register and log in, you will get the same login screen. Have you ever observed that? The login screen to log into any of the Google products will be same. Is it same or different? You have seen any time? Online resource. Have you realized that any time? It will be same. You can see once login screen will be same. See, YouTube application will be deployed on some specific server, whereas Google Drive will be deployed on a different server, and Google Photos will be deployed on different server, different application servers, all are. But login screen is same. How come? the login screen will not be there in the same application server. It will be there on a common server that acts like a gateway. Okay, whenever we are going to type the URL, any URL related to any of these three products, the request will go to one common gateway server, and this is the place where the login ID and password should be given, where it will verify whether the respective user ID and password exist in our database or not. And this common place of signing into different applications is called as single sign-on, means a single gate of entrance to a building. Building is not maintaining n number of gates. Anyone who is going to enter into the building should come through the one single entrance only. Similarly, anyone who wanted to access any of our business application have to come from a single entry. That single entry is called as single sign-on. In short, we call it as SSO. Okay, so the URL what you have typed, and the user ID what you have typed, and the password what you have typed, all the details from your browser will be submitted. The request will go to single sign-on server and will be submitted to single sign-on server. Now single sign-on server is going to collect these details, and the login screen will be deployed on this particular single sign-on server. Means the moment requests go with this URL, I mean, like, anyhow you type the URL, the login screen displayed is single sign-on server only. There you will provide the user ID and password. Now what happens is, for all the applications we have user ID and password, that will be verified whether this is existing or not. For that, usually the details of all the data will be maintained in a LDAP authentication server, lightweight directory access protocol. LDAP means, okay, the repository of all usernames and passwords of different applications of same business will be maintained in one single repository of storage. 99% most of the business uses LDAP repository. So that is lightweight directory access protocol. Everyone clear? Online resources, you understand this point?
So after giving your user ID password, it will go to authentication server, right?
Yes, correct. Authentication server. The single sign-on server, here what you have is going to verify the details, display the login screen, and verify login ID and password exist in this particular LDAP server or not. Suppose it is there in LDAP server. What does it mean? Authentication is successful. Suppose it is not there in the LDAP server, means you are outsider, you are not allowed. Authentication is going to fail and display a message like you don't have access, or let's say it will display a message like user ID and password something wrong, like that. It is going to. Okay, so this is about authentication process. Will be done at one single place. You're trying to ask something?
Yes, and in the login screen we have one option like sign in with the SSO, single sign-in option. So that is related to this one, right? In the
Okay.
by using, yeah, without entering username and password, we have a single sign-in option also for some applications.
Without
giving username and password, we have single sign-in option.
If you don't have username and password, what is the meaning of single sign-on?
No, first time if you are giving first time, and second time onwards, without giving a username and password, we can log in with the SSOs. That's what I'm saying.
See, that is not based on the server. That is based on your browser. It is going to collect your data, store your data, and it will send the request whenever you type the URL. Okay, that's not based on the server. Okay, anyhow, it should be authenticated every time. So it is very simple. Every time you want to enter into building, you have to provide access or not. Very simple. Okay, so like this, authentication will be done at the high level. Okay, once the authentication is done, based on the URL that you have provided, the authentication server, single sign-on server, is going to decide to which application server you have to be redirected to. Suppose you type youtube.com, then it will go to YouTube server. If you type googledrive.com, it will go to Google Drive server. So like that, it will decide where to route you to. So now, but single sign-on server will not decide that. Single sign-on server is going to route you to web server. There will be another web server. So the web server is going to maintain the load, but in between there will be another server also. We need not to look at everything. So now when the request comes from a browser to single sign-on to authentication server, authentication will be done and response will be sent back to single sign-on, and thereafter it will go to web server. Load balancing will be done. So like in the live environment, YouTube might have been installed on thousands of servers. Now the load balancing server is responsible for sending the requesters onto n number of different servers where the application is running by balancing the load. That means if 1 million users requests are coming, 1 million divided by 10. Imagine 10 servers are there on which application is deployed. So that load will be balanced. 1 million divided by 10. So those many number of users on one server and another server, like that it will be distributing. So like that the request will come to application server. Load balancing server is going to forward the request to the respective application server. Now in Pega, Java or any object-oriented programming language, usually when application server is reached, the first file that gets executed as per the design of the system is web.xml file. What is the file? Web.xml file. In the web.xml file, you look at here the URL of Pega, especially it is the server, and in that PR web and in that PR servlet. Okay, so when it comes here in the var file that gets loaded, it is going to execute web.xml file. In the web.xml file, it will have the details about which servlet to execute. If because Pega is built based on Java coding, right? So it uses servlets. Suppose in case of .NET, it may use something else, some other UI, ASP pages may get loaded. Here in case of Pega, servlet gets executed and JSP pages, something like that, may get loaded. So now it comes to application server web.xml, and thereafter it load PR servlet, and once it executes PR servlet, the next place it goes here is authorization service. That we call it as authentication service also. Look at here. Authentication service. So the authentication service is going to get executed. So authentication service when executed, we know about web services, right? All the processing in the web service will be done by activities. So here you have one activity. So the activity will get executed. When it comes to authentication service for authorization purpose, activity will get executed. In the activity, you can look at here, obj open. And what is happening? Check for the existence of operator. What does it do? From here onwards, we know the process. Once it comes to PRPC, to the respective application, it is going to get into PRPC and verify the operator table. Suppose the login ID you have given is an operator ID here. You are allowed, else you are not authorized to access this particular application. And now operator ID is there, let's say. So the operator ID which it has got from the load balancing server, from SSO onwards till load balancing server, everything it is there in the system. Operator ID is there means what will be the next step? You know about these things, previously we discussed already from here onwards. Anyone knows about it? Yeah, please respond.
Access
Check for access group. Perfect. So operator table, if it is there, that's okay. If not there, you can see here error pages will be displayed. So if any failure in checking for the existence of operator not available, it will go back and display error. Okay. So now hold on. So if the operator ID is there, it will take the access group. From the access group, it will take, what does it takes? It takes application. You can see here operator ID after access group. From the access group, it will take which application to load and which portal to be loaded and which roles to be loaded. Okay, everyone clear? So this is what going to happen to find out your authorization. So based on the access roles, you will be authorized to access some of the things. Everyone clear? So overall this process, of designing the request processing from browser to till application server to the respective components is said to be application architecture. In interview, if they ask you what is your application architecture, you have to respond to say this. So our application architecture is designed to have a single sign-on server. When a request is being made from any client from the browser or any other places, request will come to single sign-on server where it will display a login screen where users are going to give the login ID and password. It will be verified against our LDAP authentication server, and where if on successful authentication, it will go through web server. Web server is going to, or load balancing server is going to redirect the respective request to the application server. On application server, it is going to execute it is going to read web.xml and servlet name, and thereafter it is going to execute authentication service. After authentication service, it goes to execute authentication activity. In that, it will check operator table, operator ID is available or not. If available, it reads access group. From the access group, reads application, portals, and access roles, and loads the necessary application with the portal and giving the respective roles to the operator. So overall, this process is called application architecture. Everyone clear? Online resources.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now, let me close this. There is, you can go and watch this video from my